Upon gaining independence from Great Britain in 1966, the southern African country of Botswana was the second poorest country in the entire world. Despite occupying a territory about the same size as Spain, there was a grand total of just 12 kilometers of paved roads in the entire country. There were no hospitals and no universities, and the vast majority of its people were illiterate. Even within the small educated population, only 22 people had attended university, and only about 100 more had graduated high school. The country had no formal economy, and most of its citizens depended on cattle herding and subsistence farming as their only source of income. But fast forward 5 decades later, and Botswana now stands apart as one of the most remarkable economic development success stories. Botswana today is the world's largest producer of gem diamonds and is one of only a handful of middle-income countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Botswana's GDP per capita was recently estimated at just over $18,500, placing it on par with countries like Mexico and Turkey, and above Brazil and Iran. In the most recent Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, Botswana was ranked as the least corrupt country in Africa, posting a better score than South Korea, Italy, and China. Botswana is also Africa's longest-running multi-party democracy and is one of the most tolerant and peaceful countries in Africa. Although there's a long list of reasons why Botswana has been so successful, one of the most important factors was the visionary leadership of its first president, Sir Seretse Khama, the Botswana leader portrayed by British-Nigerian actor David Oyelowo in the 2016 film A United Kingdom. Born as the heir to the throne of the most powerful royal family in what was then known as the British Protectorate of Bechuanaland, Seretse Khama shot to international fame following the public controversy that surrounded his marriage to his English wife, Ruth Williams. The marriage was rejected both at home and abroad, firstly by Khama's own family, and secondly by the apartheid-promoting government of the Union of South Africa, which shared a border with Bechuanaland. You see, unlike countries like Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria, Bechuanaland was a British protectorate and not a British colony, which meant that it was technically still led by the native Bechuanaland rulers as opposed to the British Crown. And so by going against his family's wishes, Seretse Khama was putting his political future at serious risk. Now, although most of Khama's kinsmen eventually grew to accept the marriage, the geopolitical blowback would prove a lot more difficult to resolve. Having banned interracial marriages in 1949, the South African government was seriously opposed to having an interracial couple holding such an important position in a large country right across the northern border. Taking swift action, the South African government banned Seretse and his wife Ruth from setting foot on South African territory. The ban also extended to the city of Mahikeng, which at the time served as the administrative capital of Bechuanaland. The South Africans also petitioned the British government to strip Seretse Khama of his birthright to become the chief of one of Bechuanaland's most influential tribes. And with the Labour-led government of Prime Minister Clement Attlee heavily in debt following World War II, Britain could not afford to risk breaking its relationship with South Africa, which was its primary source of cheap gold and uranium. And so, despite being heavily criticised by various pressure groups, the British government conducted a judicial inquiry which ultimately concluded that Khama would have been perfectly fit for leadership, but for his unfortunate marriage. Khama and his wife were then subsequently exiled from Bechuanaland in 1951. In 1956, however, the couple was allowed to return to Bechuanaland as normal citizens after Seretse Khama renounced the throne. Khama subsequently returned to politics in 1961 when he set up the Bechuanaland Democratic Party. His exile and renouncement of the throne had raised his profile among regular people, and he was elected Prime Minister of Bechuanaland following a landslide victory in 1965. As Prime Minister, Khama led the push for his nation's independence, and on the 30th of September 1966, Bechuanaland became the independent Republic of Botswana with Sir Seretse Khama as its first president. With his newly independent nation desperately poor and lacking basic amenities, Khama immediately got to work on what would ultimately go down as one of the most impressive economic transformation programs in modern African history. Khama's plan to transform Botswana was based on building an economy powered by the country's three main resources, which were cattle, copper, and diamonds. And while many other newly independent African governments would go on to see the resources become more of a curse than a blessing due to greed, corruption, and tribal infighting, Khama's government would be an exception to the general rule. In addition to implementing a very strong judicial and legislative system with effective checks and balances, Seretse Khama's economic policies would run contrary to the Marxist consensus amongst most of Africa's newly independent states, such as Kwame Nkrumah's Ghana and Sekou Touré's Guinea. His administration would put pragmatism over ideology, adopting business-friendly policies such as low corporate and income taxes and low import tariffs. And although he shared a border with the openly racist regimes of South Africa and Rhodesia, Khama was determined to build a nation where merit and content of character, as opposed to skin color, would be the primary determining factor for achievement and opportunity. Despite facing considerable political pressure to forcefully replace all foreign members of the civil service with native-born citizens regardless of their skill levels, Khama's government stated numerous times that it would continue to employ foreign workers until the local population was sufficiently well educated and skilled to compete for the same jobs. Khama also employed several policy consultants and invited foreign mining companies to search his soil for more resources. This would lead to a significant increase in the government's income as additional copper, nickel and coal deposits were discovered. In 1969, the government of Botswana entered into a partnership agreement with the De Beers Mining Company, setting up a joint venture known today as the Botswana Mining Company. Over the next 5 years, the government of Botswana increased its shareholding in the company from 15% to a full 50% and is also reported to have negotiated a profit-sharing agreement in which the government got 70% of the profit on every $1 in sales of Botswana's diamonds. By the mid-1970s, Botswana was making so much money from its mining industry that the government was running at a budget surplus, and between the years of 1960 and 1980, Botswana was recorded as the fastest growing economy in the entire world. And thanks to its efficient and relatively corruption-free civil service, the Khama administration successfully invested its income into building the country's infrastructure and setting up free hospitals, public schools, and universities. In order to boost its meat industry, the government provided subsidies to cattle farmers, built slaughterhouses, subsidized treatment for livestock, and constructed cattle ranches. The Botswana Meat Commission was also created as a sole seller of beef in the country, responsible for setting prices and selling beef to the regional and international markets. Khama was also personally involved in negotiating a lucrative trade deal with the European Economic Community, which allowed Botswana to export beef to Europe at a price far higher than the world average. As Khama's primary focus was on economic development, Botswana initially only devoted a small proportion of its national budget to military spending. However, following repeated threats of intrusion by South African and Rhodesian forces, the Botswana Defence Force was formed in 1977 to serve as the country's primary defence unit. Botswana's foreign policy was always to stay neutral and only exert military force in self-defence. Seretse Khama would nevertheless play a major role in the negotiations at the end of the Rhodesian Bush War and the creation of the independent nation of Zimbabwe. He was also instrumental in the creation of the Southern African Development Coordination Conference, which later evolved into the Southern African Development Community, which is the leading intergovernmental organization working to boost economic cooperation among 16 African countries in Southern Africa. Khama's government would be hugely popular in Botswana, and its Botswana Democratic Party would go on to win 3 elections in 1969, 1974, and 1979. However, his strong and stable leadership would be tragically cut short, as less than a year after winning his 3rd election, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And on the 13th of July 1980, Sir Seretse Khama died in office and was succeeded by his vice president, Kwet Masiri. Over 40,000 people turned out to pay their final respects as his body was laid in the country's capital of Gaborone. But even in death, Khama's legacy continued, as 20 years after the tragic end of his leadership, his son Ian Khama was elected in a landslide victory as the 4th president of Botswana and would go on to enjoy a successful 10-year term as the country's leader. Although his achievements may never get the same level of recognition as other popular African leaders such as South Africa's Nelson Mandela, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, or Burkina Faso's Thomas Sankara, Sir Seretse Khama will forever be recognized and celebrated by the people of Botswana as one of the finest statesmen the continent has ever produced.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, follow, share and like our video. It's the best way of supporting us.